Now in the mid-pontine level, if there is a transection, what will basically happen? If the mid-pontine center, if there is a transection, whose support the child has lost? Apneustic or pontine? Upper pons or lower pons is gone? Upper pons is there. You have transected in the mid-pons, so? No. Upper pons is gone because medulla is below the lower pons. Agreed. So that lead to a rapid shallow breathing classically is what need to be basically remembered. So if the transection is below the level of the medulla, respiration totally stops. If the transection is between pons and medulla, there is a spontaneous respiration in spite of gasping. And if the transection is above the level of the pons, then there is an automatic respiration continues normally, but voluntary respiration doesn't occur. Suddenly professor of medicine is coming to the ward, your breathing rate will increase. Looking at the tough professor in the exam hall. Reason? Your cerebral cortex told you, not your pneumotaxic or anybody told you. So that voluntary control of respiration is gone coming from the brain if the transection is above the level of the pons. Suppose if the pneumotaxic center in the pons directly got an infarct and it got injured, then what will happen? The respiration becomes slower and the tidal volume becomes deeper and greater. If there is an isolated lesion of the pneumotaxic center. If there is a vagotomy, what will happen? Normally vagus will inhibit the inspiratory neurons in the medulla. If that is gone, then the depth of inspiration becomes typically increased is what need to be remembered. Suppose if vagotomy is done, even pneumotaxic center is also gone, then what will happen? Then there is no control at all and there is a prolonged respiratory spasm like a breath holding without any regulation at all. That is what is going to happen. Now let's go to the next question. The girl presents with the pain in the legs, recurrent vomiting, headache and all physical investigations are normal. What is your diagnosis? Simple diagnosis. Conversion disorder. Conversion disorder where she is trying to basically think that she is abnormal, complaining of lot of somatic symptoms. So all the investigations are normal. That is basically called the conversion disorder. Now, how many would like to say somatization disorder here? Do anybody like to argue it as a somatization disorder as a diagnosis in this given case? But in somatization disorder, what happens is there is an internal stress in the background which is reflecting as a somatic symptom. So no such history is given over here. So that's the reason we consider possibility of a conversion disorder more likely in this given case. Now if there is a cytotoxic waste, how do you want to basically dispose it? This is another favorite question of the examiner, you should know. Category 1, category 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. Cytotoxic comes under which category, doctor? Category 5. So category 5 cytotoxic drugs need to be incinerated and disposed in the secured landfills is considered to be the management of choice, and in future any question can come on other categories also. I leave that in the literature given to you for you to review. Then another common question asked in a similar topic which can occur in PGA or any other entrance down the line is the color of that disposing bag. Yellow is basically for category 1, 2, 3, 6, etc. Try to review those color coding also. Now where will the deep peroneal nerve sensory innervation will be going to? It will be going to the toe or the little, big toe or the little toe? What is the dermatomal value of big toe, doctor? L5 or S1? L5. Whereas the little toe is basically S1. 1 is a small number, so little toe. Remember. So it is a deep peroneal nerve which will go to the big toe and the first interval between the intertarsal, interphalangeal space in the foot. It is the innervation is what need to be remembered. If there is genital wart in pregnancy, you can't give podophyllin, so cryotherapy becomes the treatment of choice. Pseudo-gout doesn't involve the small joints like the big toe, like gout, rather it involves the big joint like the knee joint is what need to be remembered. To identify fungi, we basically use the Gomery methamine silver staining. So how many questions about the stains, doctor? 2 questions on the stains. and no AIMS entrance without a question on stain will be there. Let me tell you, if you take past recent papers, either November session or May session, one stain will be there. Usually, if there is no stain in pathology, there will be a stain in forensic medicine. Blood stain, semen stain, etc., etc. In fact, there is one more stain also in this paper. There was one question on semen stain. On the clothes, if it is there, will you use ultraviolet or infrared? What is your answer? Use the ultraviolet rather than infrared rays is what need to be remembered. So this is the Gomery-Methymine stain of the Pneumocystis carinii, Cryptococcus neoformans typically staining with GMS, and this is the Coccidioides immitis which is staining with the Gomery-Methymine stain. Lot of times blowout fracture questions are a favorite question of the examiner. In the blowout fracture, what is basically fractured? It is the floor or the roof? It is the floor. Floor has anterior posterior aspect. Which one? It is the posterior part of the floor of the orbit, which is the one which is more commonly broken down. In the blowout fracture is what you need to fundamentally remember. It is the posterior medial part of the floor of the orbit which is most commonly injured. A child has a Wilms tumor. The other kidney also is showing nephroblastomatosis. Then does it carry a good or a bad prognosis? You should always remember what is the staging system. If there is a synchronous bilateral renal involvement with the Wilms, it comes under the stage 5, which carries a poor prognosis. That's the reason stage 5 is what you stage the baby, and hence it carries a poor prognosis is what need to be remembered. One more question on the Wilms. Once more, a frequently asked topic, top 20 topics in pediatrics. Aniridia is typically associated with the Wilms tumor is what need to be remembered. What is Wager syndrome, doctor? W for Wilms, A for aniridia, genitourinary malformation and mental retardation. What is Dennis-Drash syndrome? Pseudohermaphroditism, Wilms tumor and glomerulopathy. Then which trisomy with Wilms tumor? It is the trisomy 18 which is associated. So these are all the things you have to somehow remember until entrance. Then what is Beckwith-Wiedemann syndrome? It is ectopic horseshoe kidney, hypospadias, hemihypertrophy and organomegaly along with the Wilms tumor is basically called the Beckwith-Wiedemann syndrome is what need to be remembered. Now a 67-year-old smoker, and he shows hemoptysis. You have done bronchoscopy and you got a undifferentiated tissue. What is the best immunohistochemistry marker here? Now tell me, doctor, what is the diagnosis that is there in your mind before you plan for a staining? Hemoptysis with an undifferentiated tumor. A likelihood of fibroma is there, a soft tissue tumor. So generally cytokeratin, immunohistochemical staining is the beginning of the probing into diagnosis. Whether it is cytokeratin positive or not, vimentin positive or not, accordingly there is an algorithm for diagnosis. It is one of the rare questions. So nothing to really bother, it may not come in any future at all. Now let us talk about the rib notching. What are the various causes of the rib notching? Fundamentally, why will rib notching occur? Rib notching occur because the collaterals of what? Aorta, aortic collaterals. Then what is aorta trying to do by developing collaterals? It wants to basically circulate the blood from an obstructed part of the aorta and overcome that obstruction like coarctation of aorta. So it typically develops with any of these shunts fundamentally, and even pulmonary atresia with VSD also can show collaterals, but I doubt what is the option C that was given. If anybody recall, just let me know that. Now cholangiocarcinoma, is the gallstone is a risk factor or a biliary stone is a risk factor for cholangiocarcinoma, doctor? Between the two. We need to remember that gallstones are not believed to increase the risk of the cholangiocarcinoma. 200% you should remember. But choledocholithiasis is definitely a documented risk factor for the cholangiocarcinoma is what I like to underscore. Similarly, inflammatory bowel disease also. there's a risk for developing the sclerosing cholangitis, and followed by that there's a development of cholangiocarcinoma is what need to be remembered. Now, there's adenocarcinoma of the gallbladder. It is penetrating the muscular layer but not serosa. There is no metastasis found at the time of surgery. What do you want to do in this case? Is it MBBS level question? No. How many have seen gallbladder cancer? At least very few, unless luckily on that day when you have gone 1 out of the 30 days posting to the OT, your chief is operating that day. Now the question here is, first stage the gallbladder cancer. Based on the staging, tell me what is the different treatment options that are there. You didn't answer also, no regret about this question, because it's very difficult unless you are a very busy and a serious academician. Now anyway, let us answer. If the tumor, carcinoma of the gallbladder, is in situ, or it has invaded lamina propria, and the resection of the margins, they are negative for tumor, then nothing need to be done. Post-operatively, plug and pray. Wait and watch and observe. At the time of operation, if the margins are negative for tumor and it is still in a carcinoma in situ stage, or it has only invaded the lamina propria. But if the tumor is bigger, T1B, stage T1 with B, and the margins of resection are positive, then what do you want to do? Then if there is no metastasis evident, just like our clinical case, you have to do a little additional surgery. So you have collected the fee from the patient only for a package of gallbladder removal for the cancer, but you found that it is T1A, T1B. Okay. Then what you have to do, additional surgery, you also need to do the partial hepatic resection and also the regional lymphadenectomy. That also need to be done if it is in the T1B and higher stage, is what need to be remembered. Suppose if the patient is having a unresectable tumor, widely infiltrated, then the purpose of surgery is only palliative, not curative, is what you have to basically conclude. So there is a reason. What is your answer, doctor? It is a segmental hepatectomy should be planned immediately, not after some days. Because already it is in stage T1B, it has invaded the serosa and the margins are positive. So that is the reason you have to plan hepatectomy, partial hepatectomy along with the removal of the gallbladder along with its tumor is what need to be remembered as the protocol. Now let's go to the next question. Glasgow Coma Scale, can it be 0? Lowest score. What is the lowest score, doctor? 3, minimum 3. So accordingly the highest score can be 15, lowest can be 3. Eye opening with painful stimulus is there. So hence what is the value? 2. Then inappropriate verbal response is 3. 2 plus 3, 5. Localizes the pain is 5. So 5 plus 5 is 10. So that becomes the answer. Now the next question is about the phrenic nerve, left phrenic nerve. If you take the left phrenic nerve, it passes over the aortic arch anteriorly, medial to the left vagus, and it will passes anterior to the left hilum, not posterior to that is what need to be remembered. So that is the reason you must know the phrenic nerve's segmental anatomical course also. But do you think it is a answer crackable? Very difficult. So but still remember, doctor, until 130 questions they are all crackable. Very predictable questions of the examiner. Happily you can answer. We find about some 15 questions first time created by the examiner in the last part of our discussion, and there are another 10-15 questions like this. So phrenic nerve is known to us, we never thought of that its anatomical course comes as a question in the exam. So that is also not crackable. Forget about those 30 questions. Out of the remaining 170 you should crack 150. That is the whole idea. Okay, and 130 or 140 questions fall into the 1200 topics given in the high yield scanner based on the analysis of the past 15 years. thoroughly you should be ready. Gallbladder cancer or contraception or any other topic. Now let's go to the next question. With regard to the prostatic urethra, yeah, but this is a crackable question, frequently asked. Now tell me, doctor, how do you differentiate bulbar urethra from membranous urethra from prostatic urethra? If you look at the urethra, the part of the urethra which is just before penile urethra is bulbar urethra. Then you have what is called membranous urethra. Then you have verumontanum. Next to, above the verumontanum, you have got the prostatic urethra, which will finally open into the bladder. So, is the verumontanum is a part of the prostatic urethra, or is it proximal to the, rather distal to the prostatic urethra? Distal, it is not a part. So, you all agree with me that prostatic urethra is trapezoid, agreed. Prostatic ducts open into it, agreed. It contains urethral crest, yes, but it does not have verumontanum. Verumontanum is, you call distal or proximal to that? Distal to the prostatic urethra and proximal to the membranous urethra. That is the location of the verumontanum. Now, benzoyl pyridine metabolism. This is another disgusting question in the entrance exam. Benzyl pyridine, it is not aspirin, which you commonly use. So the question of the examiner is, will P450 metabolize? If so, will it do epoxidation or hydroxylation? So tell me about it. First time you will be knowing what is benzyl pyridine, introduced in the entrance exam hall. So no regrets about it. It is equally enigmatic answer even for me also. I did not get an answer for that. Now coming to gonorrhea. Gonorrhea is our old friend. Out of the 4 STDs, one question invariably comes: chancroid, chancre, gonorrhea, LGV. This is our agreement before going to exam hall, right? Now the question is, very simple question examiner is asking you. Will all strains of gonorrhea will be sensitive to penicillin? Examiner asked that question because some are not really sensitive, some are resistant naturally. So it does not need any reading at all. Examiner's what you call helping out question it is. There are resistant strains definitely. Then if there is a cement stain, one more stain in our life, how do you identify it? It's ultraviolet light where you will be identifying it. Now there are 2 kinds of substances when it comes to the diffusion, doctor. I mean, which cross the alveolar membrane. What are they? Perfusion limitation versus diffusion limitation. For any gas to diffuse across alveolar membrane, either of these 2 are the important limitations. Carbon monoxide like gas, which has got a very high affinity to bind with the hemoglobin, it is basically called diffusion limited. Whereas the nitrous oxide like gas, it does not form any bond with the hemoglobin, it is basically perfusion limited. So that is the fundamental difference between the 2 is what need to be remembered. Now if there is a hematuria during the labor with the previous LSCS, obviously what is your answer? It is a dehiscence of the scar and a rupture of the uterus is the most likely cause. Signs of the uterine rupture you should be quite sure about. Now the next question is about H. influenzae. Any entrance you go, what is the common question about it? There is a factor X and factor V requirement for growth of the Haemophilus influenzae, no big deal about it. But now the question comes, is it a rare cause or is it a common cause of the meningitis in the first 2 months of life, doctor? Once upon a time before HIV vaccine was discovered, it is a very common cause. But no more after the HIV vaccine has come, it has become a common cause, it has become a rarer cause is what need to be basically remembered. Now, if there is a meconium stained infant, there is a limitation to use the Apgar score to assess him. So, especially you can't depend on the tone of the baby. If there is a meconium stained amniotic fluid at the time of the birth, which is suggestive of the asphyxia of the baby, in such scenario you can't depend upon the tone is what need to be remembered. Now Kawasaki is a vasculitis in pediatrics or adults? So question of the examiner is, do you find in Davidson or OP guy? As simple a question as that. But you remember reading it in pathology, no one can help it. So it is found in children. What kind of conjunctival inflammation you will see? Non-exudative inflammation will be there. And you find a classical maculopapular rash, coronary vasculitis, coronary ischemia, etc., etc. And what kind of tongue? A strawberry kind of a beefy red tongue is what you typically come across. Now I think this is the easiest question you can remember. AS4 titer is not a major criteria. If you know that, that is sufficient. Easiest question. Now this is a good question. Lot of times the questions have come on a topic called genomic imprinting, anticipation and mosaicism. Invariably one question will come. So please remember, what do you mean by uniparental disomy is what I like to ask you. Normally out of the 23 chromosomes, how many, let us say chromosome 12, you get from whom? One chromosome 12 from father, one chromosome 12 from mother. Instead of that, if both of them come from the father, you call it as uniparental disomy. And that can lead to disease. Once more, if you take chromosome 15, a abnormal chromosome 15, if both 15 chromosomes come from mother, it is a different syndrome. If both 15 chromosomes come from the father, it is a different syndrome. Accordingly, you have a paternal uniparental disomy and maternal uniparental disomy. So Prader-Willi syndrome is basically a maternal uniparental disomy of chromosome 15. Whereas Angelman syndrome is maternal or paternal? Paternal. Okay, agreed. If you take the Prader-Willi syndrome, it is Prader-Willi is maternal, right? Paternal? M for mother, M for? Okay. All right, whatever it is, you got the concept of it, that is more important. But I remember it as maternal would be Prader-Willi. Is it correctable? Subject to correction. Okay, great. Now COX inhibitor, basically why do you use the COX inhibitor in the management of endometriosis? Because COX inhibitor is also inhibitor of the proliferation of the cells. That is the reason we use it in the endometriosis is what need to be remembered. 1 week before, if you are not able to recall, what is it basically called as? But I like to ask you, what do you mean by recent memory, remote memory and delayed memory? If the recall doesn't happen, something which was told 20 to 30 minutes back, you call delayed memory. Just now you tell and then after finishing about 2 to 3 minutes you asked and he is unable to answer, it is called recent memory. Few years back it is basically called remote memory. But the examiner's question is about 1 week before. What we will call it as? I am not sure. I am unable to get a proper definition of 1 week before. I empirically think that maybe it can be called as a remote memory. But remote is generally few years back, right? Now let us go to the next question. Barium swallow will show a posterior indentation with which chamber enlargement, doctor, in the heart? Left atrium, which typically occurs in mitral stenosis. So that is the reason it is a left atrial enlargement. Generally branchial cysts and fistulas, they arise from which branchial arch derivatives? Second branchial arch. But if you compare cyst with the fistula, which is much more common, the branchial cysts are much more common than that of the branchial sinuses is what need to be basically remembered. Then a male who was subjected to surgery suddenly had a end-tidal carbon dioxide values which have reduced from 40 to 10 and Millville murmur is there. On telephone, what is your diagnosis? Classically, air embolism is responsible for hypoxemia and a sudden fall of the end-tidal PCO2 on the operating table. As an anesthetist you are going to come across, it is air embolism, classical clinical picture which is previously asked many number of times in the entrance. Now it is a median nerve which passes under flexor retinaculum, not ulnar nerve. I think easiest question which we don't need discussion. But this is a difficult question. Why? Because we are in South India, we don't see visceral leishmaniasis that commonly. Have you seen? But in West Bengal it is a short case in the medicine final exam. So we basically use pentavalent antimonials like stibogluconate. We also use miltefosine and paramomycin also in the management of visceral leishmaniasis, and there is no role for hydroxychloroquine is what you need to basically remember. What is HPV vaccine? It is another numeric based question, and is it a previous question? No, not at all. It is type 6, 11, 16, 18. A quadrivalent vaccine is basically the human papilloma vaccine is what need to be remembered. Himachal Pradesh with inguinal lymphadenopathy with the bipolar staining. What is your diagnosis, doctor? Melioidosis. Many times this question was asked in the past entrances. So it is the Weizen stain which is used for the rapid diagnosis of the Burkholderia pseudomallei, which is responsible for the melioidosis, is what need to be remembered. Now a child has a chronic diarrhea, there is 100 micron ova in the cyst in the stool sample, which is not a part of the differential. Which species? Is it trematodes or protozoans or cystodes, which are responsible for 100 micron ova in the stool, doctor? It is generally trematodes. Simple question of the examiner is recognize which is not a trematode out of them. Naturally, what is your answer? Clonorchis, Phaseola and Ophisthorchis viverrani, they are all basically the trematodes, as all of you know very well. And blood fluke is Schistosoma, lung fluke is Paragonimus, liver fluke is Clonorchis, and Phaseola hepatica is also a liver fluke, and the Ophisthorchis viverrani and Phaseola are basically intestinal flukes is what need to be remembered. So the odd man out becomes the GRD out of them. Now a 7-month-old baby with whooping cough, from where do you want to take basically for culture the specimen? It is from the nasopharyngeal swab, from where you will be taking and you will subjecting it to the Bordet Gengos medium or PCR, or any of these investigations is basically performed. If there is a head of the fibula fracture, then peroneal nerve will become injured, but there is no affliction of the anterior, the tibial nerve, which goes to the popliteal fossa, arising from the sciatic nerve. You know that sciatic breaks into tibial and common peroneal. Common peroneal goes in relation with fibula, but tibial does not. Tibial passes to the popliteal fossa, hence it is not basically affected. This another previously straight away repeat question. Radiation induced brain necrosis, how do you differentiate that from that of a? After radiation to a brain tumor, what is the main fear for you? Is it a recurrence of the tumor? So how do you differentiate whether what you are seeing as a lesion on the MRI, is it a radiation induced necrosis or is it a recurrence of the tumor? You subject him to the PET scan, which is the best way in order to identify whether it is a recurrence or is it a radiation induced necrosis is what need to be remembered. How do you treat desmoid tumor? Basically desmoids are all those tumors which arise from the musculoeponeurotic structures, and this kind of a storiform pattern of histology is very classical, and it is the complete excision. Radical excision is considered to be the management. Wide excision, not much of a role for radiotherapy. Radiation is only used if there is a recurrences, but not as a primary therapy. So wide excision is the treatment of the desmoid tumor is what need to be remembered. Now with regard to the flail chest, will paradoxical movement of the intercostal space, is it a voluntary or an involuntary thing happening? Patient has no control. He wants to stop it also, there is a paradoxical movement. So paradoxical movement may not be seen in a conscious patient or a voluntary patient is a wrong statement. It is definitely seen even in a conscious or a voluntary patient also is what need to be remembered. Lot of questions came on the flail chest. What is the definition of it? How do you manage it? Do you want to intubate or not? Etc. etc. about everything, anything about flail chest, you must be encyclopedic, doctor. Now let us go to the next question. I think now we have come to a fundamental question of our first day of anatomy. What is that? Boundaries of femoral triangle. Medial border of some muscle becomes the lateral border of the triangle. I never understood that funda. Why they complicate unnecessarily, and that too you come from a Telugu medium background already to know what is medial, what is lateral is difficult, and that too it becomes a medial border of some muscle becomes a lateral border in the posterior aspect of it, but in anterior aspect something else will happen. And you will faint on the way. So that is all the problem of first 30 days of jet stroke of anatomy for you to pick up. Anyway, I think you did not forget all that anatomy. So if you take femoral nerve, femoral sheath, femoral artery, femoral vein, lymph nodes are the most medial is what need to be basically remembered. Now what is thyroidea ima? Thyroidea ima is like a stepney in a scooter. It won't arise only from one artery in a dedicated manner. It is very promiscuous. From where, anywhere it can arise. It can arise from aorta, from the right common carotid or subclavian or from internal thoracic, from anywhere. Then what is it a common question asked in the exam? Definitely. Thyroidectomy you are doing surgery means you must know everything about thyroid anatomy and anticipate any question, which is examiner's expectation. In pregnancy we don't give live vaccination after pregnancy is already declared, so there is a reason we don't want to give MMR. We want to give it before pregnancy in the reproductive age females rather than after pregnancy begins is what you should be quite sure. When do you want to start heparin? Heparin if there is a cardiac disease or a prothrombotic state. Why do you need to use heparin in pregnancy, doctor? Somebody had mitral stenosis, require anticoagulation with a dilated left atrium. You can't give coumarin derivatives, you have to give heparin, right? So that is the reason heparin is initiated from week 36 up to delivery. But once more I like to ask you, if you have to anticoagulate a pregnant female, do you want to anticoagulate throughout the pregnancy with heparin? No. That becomes a very costly pregnancy. Finally she won't have money for getting delivered. Though she herself delivers, your role is only to give assisted breech and then collect the fee. But the question is that of during embryogenesis first trimester, give heparin. Then stop, give warfarin. You can give 2.5 or 2 milligrams and then monitor INR, everything. But once more restart at 36th week until delivery you give heparin is considered to be the protocol. If third nerve palsy is there with a sparing of pupil, is it a medical cause or surgical cause, doctor? Why third nerve palsy should cause pupillary dilatation first of all? Because the sphincter pupillae fibers which are parasympathetic are passed through third nerve. So if the third nerve palsy is there, you expect sphincter pupillae fibers also be paralyzed, oculomotor nerve, right? So that should lead to pupillary dilatation. But it won't happen in if the underlying cause of the third nerve palsy is medical cause. Can you give me medical cause of third nerve palsy? Diabetes, hypertension, atherosclerosis, etc., etc. Why? First of all, why in diabetes there is a third nerve palsy? Because in diabetes there is a arteriosclerosis of the vasa nervosum which is supplying the blood to the oculomotor nerve. When that got occluded, then third nerve palsy is occurring. But that will affect only the what kind of fibers of the third nerve? It only affects the peripherally located fibers going to the extraocular muscles and it spares the centrally located sphincter pupillae fibers. Hence there is no involvement of the pupil if the underlying cause is a medical cause like diabetes. But if there is any aneurysm like a posterior communicating artery aneurysm, it is compressing the oculomotor nerve, let us say, then it won't spare anything, it will totally compress the oculomotor nerve and that lead to involvement of the pupil. So somebody with do you find a lid lag or a inability to close the lid? What is the problem in third nerve palsy? Drooping of lid or unable to lift the lid? Drooping, because there is a paralysis of levator palpebrae superioris. With facial nerve damage, what is the problem? Unable to close the lid is the problem with facial nerve. So somebody has a drooping of the lid, you just lifted the lid and then looked at the pupil. If it is dilated, immediately you will call for a neurosurgery consultation. If the pupil is not dilated, you call for a endocrinology consultation, because it is the diabetes hypertension responsible for this. Okay, that's a whole story. Now in the eyelid, what is the most common tumor any given day? It is the basal cell carcinoma. Sebaceous carcinoma becomes the second most common only of all the eyelid malignancies, is what need to be basically remembered. If there is a defective DNA repair, we come across pyrimidine dimers which lead to the xeroderma pigmentosum, is what need to be remembered. Under light microscopy, what is the banding we do? We use the GIMSA stain in order to band the chromosomes, called G banding is the one which we do. If there is, you are trying to identify which chromosome it is, you want to know the morphology of it. Now, hepatocellular carcinoma associated with which tumor, which virus, doctor? Hepatitis B. And gastric carcinoma with H. pylori. And nasopharyngeal carcinoma with Epstein-Barr. But there is nobody to marry non-small cell lung carcinoma. It is very independent spinster. Now Lynch syndrome is basically what? It is also called HPNNC. What is the meaning of that, doctor? Hereditary non-polyposis colon carcinoma syndrome, it is called as. So in that you find the malignancy involving endometrium, ovaries, upper urinary tract, brain, skin and stomach and small intestine, liver and gallbladder is what need to be remembered. Then what is Onodi cell and Haller cell? Suddenly you feel like leaving the exam hall. If this is the first question. And it comes from I think ENT. So, but let me tell you that every time any entrance you go, this kind of 10-15 questions will be asked. But the problem is some people become obsessive to look at them and think that entrance is a big game. Entrance is a stupid game. You require IQ of 60 to crack it. You don't need not even 60, 50. Borderline moron also we can be able to crack, let me tell you. Provided we have a clue what to read, what to leave thoroughly. Little working memory we should have. Little working memory. And above all, that passion to enjoy preparation. If that is missing also, problem is there, because passion, libido, they are all amygdala issues. So nobody can be able to get that into us. So somehow we need to get it, prepare, in spite of a very high prolactin levels in the mind, we should be able to remember those limited issues. So don't worry about Onodi cells and Haller cells, but anyway, for sake of discussion I will tell you, Onodi is also called sphenoethmoidal cells. And it is located in the ethmoid air sinus and very close relation with optic nerve and internal carotid artery. Why is it very important? Because if you are trying to approach sphenoid sinus endoscopically, you don't know that there is something called Onodi group of air cells. If you hit them, there is a chance of you are hitting the optic nerve and internal carotid. Only for the surgical anatomical reason you need to basically remember that. Then Haller cells are located like this in the infraorbital location. They are also called maxilloethmoidal cells, is what need to be remembered. Now let's go to the next question. This is another very drowsy question in a national entrance. What is chemiluminescence, bioluminescence? Suddenly you feel, am I taking MD entrance or MSc biotechnology entrance? You are not quite sure. So, but anyway, phospholuminescence is a process where the substance absorbs the photons, the electron become excited by that, and then when it comes back from that re-excited state into the normal state, it releases the energy. So first it takes light, get excited, come back and release energy and release the light, which is basically called phospholuminescence. Then chemiluminescence means while answering and reading these questions we feel at least MD में seat नहीं आए तो magician बन सकते. Only these questions will help us there. Is there relation between these questions and becoming an interventional cardiologist dream? No, absolutely no relation. But they are all the screening things preventing you to become that, right? So actually these won't prevent you. What prevents you? If you say I don't know Levonorgestrel in emergency contraception, either for academic reasons, personal reasons, or whatever be the reasons, there is a failure in all domains of life. So that is the reason, don't do mistake on topics like our initial 70 questions asked previously kind of topics. You should never do the mistakes. So I leave this literature given to you for you to review, Dr. Murali really is not required for explaining them. But anyway, where are the GLUT receptors? Glucose transporter receptors are located. GLUT4 is there in the myocyte, whereas the GLUT1 is the one which is there in the erythrocytes and blood-brain barrier is what need to be remembered.